Hey y'all! Today we're going to be talking about Rohrer and Klingner Helianthus, a really pretty, interesting fountain pen ink. And to do this, I decided to try a slightly different video format that is different from everything I've done so far. I decided to try doing more of a voice-over format where I film the video first and then talk over it. And we'll see how that goes. I might hate it. I might go back to what I did before. I might love it, but it might take twice as much work as what I did before. We'll see. But the other thing that I've decided to change, and this is here to stay, is that I think I'm done with quick brown foxes and lazy dogs. Even after just a few videos of that, it gets really old. I appreciate having that sentence as something that I can just quickly write to test a pen or an ink without having to think about what I'm writing. It's good for that, and I get the benefit of being able to see every letter in the alphabet as you're writing, but I just don't know if anyone is going to watch my videos and say, ooh, you know what, I was with you until you wrote the W, and I think it's a hard pass for me now because I just don't like how that pen or that ink wrote that W. I don't think anybody watches pen videos and examines every individual letter, so I've decided to instead look through some of my favorite books and find favorite quotes, poems, things that mean something to me, things that I hope will mean something to you too. And so I'll share those with you and maybe even talk about them a little bit. And you can watch me write them. And yeah, we'll talk about the ink. We'll talk about this quote that you are currently watching me write. Yeah, so let's get started. Let's talk about the ink first. So, like I said, this is the Rohrer and Klingner Helianthus. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I think I am. It's an interesting ink. It's very light colored. Try as I might, I tried a couple different cameras and different settings, and it just turned out to look a little bit more saturated than it actually is. It looks pretty vibrantly orange in the video, and it is kind of an orange ink, but it's a little bit less saturated, a little bit more yellowy, which is interesting, and I think it makes sense with the name of the ink, Helianthus. I haven't looked it up, but I wonder if they took that from Helios, which is the god of the sun. So is that Greek or Roman? I get them so mixed up. Helios and Apollo, I think, are basically the same person, just slightly different mythologies. Anyway, so it's kind of a darker orangey yellow or a lighter yellowy orange. I don't know. I'm not super good at describing colors, but it's a nice color. It's an interesting color. I did run into one issue where if I didn't have enough lighting on my desk as I was writing, it was really hard to see because it's not the most saturated ink. So I had to make sure I had a nice strong light shining on it so I didn't feel like I was straining my eyes as I was writing. With a lot of orange inks I've used, I've struggled to feel like I'm getting enough ink on the paper. It sometimes just feels too light. And so I think when I first started using this ink, I felt the need to push my pen harder to try to get more ink to come out, which that's not really how it works. That was my instinct because I wanted it to be just a little bit darker. That's just my taste. I think there's a time and a place for these really light inks. And especially, I love how this looks in the pen. I used my TWSBI Eco, my medium nib TWSBI Eco, and it just looks so cool in that pen. So if you're going to use this ink, I highly recommend a TWSBI demonstrator or some kind of demonstrator that's going to really show off the ink because it looks really pretty in there. As far as the ink flow is concerned, it's a nicely flowing ink. It doesn't feel dry by any means. Light colored, yes, and that kind of gave me the illusion that maybe it was a little dry, but I don't think it is. It was in a TWSBI medium, which is a pretty wet writer, and it was still laying down a pretty thick line, but it wasn't out of control thick or wet by any means. Some inks out there seem to kind of run away from you because they're so wet, but this one seemed nice and controlled and wet, So it felt balanced to me and pleasant to use. I forgot to look at the dry time. I didn't do any testing there, but I didn't run into any issues either. I didn't have this ink smear on me or stick to the other page when I closed my notebook or anything like that. So I can't tell you what the dry time is, but it didn't seem to be above average as far as dry time goes. It seemed to be reasonable. I didn't notice a ton of shading in this ink. There's a little bit, but it's not, I wouldn't really advertise this ink as a shading ink. But there's a little bit of texture to it, which is nice. I also didn't really pay too close attention to bleed and feather, but on my paper, this is Clairefontaine, so a fairly high quality fountain pen paper, and I didn't have any issues. Maybe a little bit of ghosting on the back side of the page. You can kind of see that there's writing there, but no bleed through, no color on the opposite side of the page, and no feathering. It's a nice crisp line when it goes down. So it's a really well formulated ink, I think. If I were to critique the ink at all, I think I would say that it's just a tad too light for me for most purposes. I think it's a fun ink to play around with, to write a few pages with in my journal, but it's not one that I'm going to go to all the time for writing because it's just really faint. Like I said, under certain lighting conditions, it's a little bit hard to see and just not the most practical of inks. I also did a water resistance test on this ink, and I know that this ink is not marketed as water resistant, but I've noticed that a lot of inks that are not marketed as water resistant actually have some amount of water resistance to them. So I test inks that even aren't supposedly water resistant. I still want to know, are they legible after they get wet? Is there something left behind that will preserve my writing, even if most of the color and most of the ink is gone? Can I still at least read what I wrote enough to recover it? That's a big bonus for me. So there are lots of good inks out there that will preserve your writing enough if it gets rained on or whatever, to where you can still read it even if it's not really waterproof. This ink is not one of those, which makes sense. It's not very saturated, and it's usually the more saturated inks that hold onto the page a little bit better. So this one, I did a drop test and let it sit for 5 or 6 minutes, and it basically erased the ink completely. It was basically gone. So not a big problem. A lot of people don't really care about water resistance, and I have some inks that I really like the last one I reviewed, Monteverde Purple Rain. That one's not water resistant at all, and I love that ink. But in general, I do like to see a little bit of water resistance at least, just so that I feel confident that my writing is safe. When it comes to cleaning pens, cleaning ink out of pens, not all inks are created equal there. Some are really stubborn, some are really easy to get out. So I decided to show you the cleaning process for me and what that was like with this ink. And I didn't really think through my cleaning process and how it would work while filming. So yeah, I didn't feel like I was the most organized when it came to cleaning this time around. I usually do it at the kitchen sink, but my kitchen looks like a horror movie set right now. So I'm at the kitchen table with a cup, and so my system got a little bit messed up. So it was kind of a quirky little system, not as efficient as I usually am. So before you jump on in the comments and say, like, why are you cleaning your pen that way? It's because it's the first time I've cleaned a pen on video, and your brain just kind of goes out the window when you're filming yourself. And it's also funny doing it kind of watching the screen as you go, because you will notice A couple of times I went to put my pen in the cup and just like totally missed the cup. So it's not because I'm drunk or high or something. It's just because I was trying to clean a pen while watching myself clean the pen through the camera. So yeah, that also made the writing sample portion of this kind of hard. I was like, do I watch the screen or do I watch my hand? And to get the right angle, I was kind of cuddling with the screen or cuddling with my camera and the tripod and stuff. So it's kind of awkward. Also, I feel like I should add, I know that my handwriting doesn't really do justice to writing cool quotes and stuff. I'm hoping to get there. I'd really like to have this quote on my wall, actually. It talks about taking down a musical instrument, and I actually have 3 musical instruments hanging on my wall, and they are tin whistles, also known as penny whistles, and I really enjoy playing them. That's another hobby of mine. And yeah, so I'd really like to practice writing this quote a little bit more and frame it and put it there with my tin whistles. But we'll see if I get there or not. But anyway, so this quote for today, it says, "Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground." And that is a quote by Rumi. He's a famous Muslim poet from a long time ago. And this is kind of a rephrasing done by Coleman Barks, who is an American poet. So I really like this quote. I especially like where it says, "Let the beauty we love be what we do." And I like that because sometimes I feel like we can just rush into the day and do our work. At least I know I do that. I just kind of get started and do everything as fast as I can, and each day just kind of seems to be a whirlwind of trying to get things done. There's always more I want to do than I can get done. And this quote just seems to be telling us to slow down a little bit. Sometimes in all of the rush, I get caught up in that emptiness, or that feeling of being frightened or anxious or stressed about everything that's going on and everything I have to do. So I like that idea of just pausing, taking down a musical instrument, playing for a while, reflecting, and trying to focus on the beautiful things that we love and trying to pursue those. And I mean, of course, bills have to get paid and everything, but in doing that, I think there's still room to follow beauty. And that's what I hope to do with my writing as I write poetry and publish poetry. And I hope that all of you find a way to also make beautiful things that you feel add value to your life and add value to the world. Okay, well, I think that's about it. It's an interesting ink. If you like light-colored, orangey, yellowy kind of inks, it's a great one. And let me know what you think. Do you like this ink? Have you tried it? Do you have any other orange inks that you really like? Let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks. Bye.